The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. African proverb. Imagine a child growing up in an environment where their cries go unanswered, where no one looks into their eyes with warmth, where their achievements are ignored, and their pain is dismissed as insignificant. Now imagine that child growing older, carrying wounds that no one can see, wounds that shape the way they think, the way they love, and the way they see themselves. What if I told you that childhood neglect is one of the most overlooked yet devastating experiences a person can endure? What if I told you that its effects do not simply fade with time, but instead become embedded in the very fabric of who we are? And what if I told you that the last truth I will share in this video is the most profound of all, one that might change the way you understand yourself and those around you forever? Neglect is invisible, but its consequences are undeniable. Unlike physical abuse, which leaves bruises and scars on the body, neglect leaves marks on the mind and soul. It is not just about a child being left alone, it is about emotional absence, the quiet message that their needs do not matter. While some children grow up in homes filled with overt violence or cruelty, others endure a more subtle form of suffering. The pain of being unseen, unheard, and emotionally abandoned. And the worst part, many people who experience neglect as children do not even realize that what they went through was damaging. They assume that because they were not hit, they were not harmed. But research tells us otherwise. Developmental psychology has long studied the effects of emotional neglect, and the findings are disturbing. Neuroscientist Bruce Perry, an expert in childhood trauma, has shown that a child's brain adapts to its environment. If a child receives love, stability, and attention, their brain develops in a way that fosters security and confidence. But if they grow up in an unpredictable or emotionally barren environment, their brain adjusts for survival. Their stress response system becomes hyperactive, flooding their body with cortisol, the hormone responsible for the fight or flight reaction. Over time, this constant exposure to stress changes the brain, making it more difficult to regulate emotions, trust others, and feel safe in the world. But it is not just the brain that suffers. Neglect affects the way a person connects with others for the rest of their life. Psychologist John Bowlby, the father of attachment theory, discovered that children who do not receive consistent emotional support develop insecure attachment patterns. Some become anxiously attached, constantly seeking reassurance, afraid of being abandoned. Others develop avoidant attachment, convincing themselves that they do not need anyone, suppressing their emotions to protect themselves from further disappointment. And then there are those who develop disorganized attachment, a painful combination of longing and fear that makes relationships chaotic and unpredictable. Think about this for a moment. How many people do you know who struggle with relationships, who push people away even when they crave love, or who seem unable to trust others no matter how much reassurance they receive? How often do we judge people for being too needy or too distant without asking, what happened to them? What if their behavior is not a choice but a deeply ingrained response to a childhood where their emotional needs were ignored? The effects of neglect do not stop at relationships. They extend into every aspect of life. Studies have found that children who experience neglect are at higher risk for mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, and even personality disorders. Many develop chronic self-doubt, struggling to believe they are worthy of love or success. Some turn to self-destructive behaviors, substance abuse, reckless decision-making, or even criminal activity, not because they are inherently bad, but because they are trying to fill an emotional void left by years of neglect. When someone has never been given warmth, they may seek it in dangerous places. And yet, despite all of this, childhood neglect is one of the least talked about forms of childhood adversity. Society recognizes and condemns physical abuse, but it often dismisses emotional neglect as something minor or insignificant. We see adults who struggle with their emotions, who sabotage their relationships, who battle addiction, and we label them as weak or irresponsible. But we rarely stop to ask what happened to them. We rarely consider that these behaviors may be symptoms of wounds inflicted long before they had the ability to understand what was happening to them. But what if there was a way to break this cycle? What if recognizing the effects of childhood neglect could be the first step toward healing? And what if the most important revelation of all, the one I will share at the end of this video, could offer hope to those who have suffered in silence for far too long? Stay with me, because the truth I am about to reveal next might just change everything. Neglect does not just shape the emotional landscape of an individual, it alters their very perception of reality. A child who grows up without emotional validation learns to distrust their own feelings. They internalize the idea that their emotions are unimportant, that their needs are a burden, and that seeking comfort or connection will lead to disappointment. Over time, this belief system becomes a core part of who they are, affecting every aspect of their life. Imagine a child who falls and scrapes their knee. A loving caregiver rushes to comfort them, offering reassurance and tending to the wound. This small act does more than soothe the pain. It teaches the child that their distress matters, that help is available, and that they are not alone. Now imagine another child who experiences the same injury, but receives no comfort, no acknowledgement, no validation of their pain. That child learns a different lesson, that their suffering is invisible, that they must endure pain alone, and that reaching out for help is pointless. This lesson extends beyond childhood. Adults who experienced emotional neglect often struggle to recognize and express their feelings. They may feel numb, disconnected, or unable to identify what they truly want in life. They may downplay their own suffering, dismissing their emotions as not that bad, or comparing their experiences to others who had it worse. This is one of the most insidious effects of neglect. It convinces its victims that they are overreacting, that their pain is insignificant and that they should simply get over it. But neuroscience tells us that the brain does not simply get over prolonged emotional neglect. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and emotional regulation, develops differently in neglected children. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes hyperactive, making these individuals more prone to anxiety, panic, and emotional overwhelm. When a neglected child grows up, they may struggle with a constant sense of unease, as if waiting for something bad to happen, even in moments of safety and calm. And the effects do not stop there. Studies have shown that neglected children are more likely to struggle with self-worth, often feeling undeserving of love, success, or happiness. They may develop perfectionistic tendencies, believing that if they just work hard enough, if they achieve enough, they will finally be seen, finally be valued. Others go in the opposite direction, avoiding challenges altogether, convinced that failure is inevitable. This is because neglect instills a deep, subconscious belief: I am not enough. This belief plays out in their relationships as well. Many adults who experienced childhood neglect struggle with setting boundaries. Some become people pleasers, desperate for approval, afraid that asserting their needs will drive others away. Others become emotionally distant, building walls to protect themselves from the pain of rejection. And then there are those who fluctuate between the two, craving intimacy, yet fearing it, pushing people away even as they long to be held. But perhaps the most heartbreaking effect of neglect is how easily it is passed down to the next generation. A child who was never taught emotional validation may grow into a parent who struggles to provide it for their own children, not out of cruelty, but because they never learned how. Neglect is not always intentional. Sometimes it is the result of generations of emotional wounds, of parents repeating patterns they do not even realize are harmful. Yet there is hope. The cycle can be broken. Healing from neglect is not about blaming the past. It is about understanding it. It is about recognizing the patterns that were ingrained in childhood and making the conscious decision to change them. It is about learning to acknowledge emotions, to set boundaries, to believe in one's own worth. And while the scars of neglect may never fully disappear, they do not have to define the rest of a person's life. But how does one begin this journey of healing? What are the steps that can help someone who has been emotionally neglected reclaim their sense of self? And what is the most powerful truth of all, the one that has the potential to transform pain into strength? In the next part of this video, we will uncover the answers. Stay with me, because what comes next could be the turning point you have been waiting for. Healing from childhood neglect is not a simple process. It is not about waking up one day and deciding to move on. It is about undoing years, sometimes decades of subconscious conditioning. It is about learning to value oneself after a lifetime of being told, directly or indirectly, that one's needs do not matter. And perhaps the most difficult part of healing is this: before one can move forward, they must first acknowledge what was lost. Many survivors of childhood neglect struggle with this first step. They dismiss their own pain, convincing themselves that their childhood was not that bad, or that other people had it worse. But healing requires honesty. It requires looking at the past with clear eyes, not to dwell in suffering, but to understand it. Only by recognizing the emotional wounds left by neglect can one begin the process of healing them. One of the first steps in this journey is learning to reconnect with emotions. Neglect teaches children to suppress their feelings, to silence their needs, to believe that their emotions are a source of shame or inconvenience. As adults, this often manifests as emotional numbness, a sense of being disconnected from oneself. Some people describe it as feeling like they are watching their life from the outside, or going through the motions without truly experiencing anything. Reconnecting with emotions means creating space to feel again, without fear of judgment or rejection. A powerful tool for this is mindfulness. Studies in neuroscience have shown that mindfulness practices, such as meditation and deep breathing, can help regulate the nervous system, calming the overactive stress response that childhood neglect often creates. By practicing mindfulness, individuals can begin to notice their emotions without immediately pushing them away. They can learn to sit with discomfort instead of ignoring it. Another crucial aspect of healing is self-compassion. Survivors of neglect often carry a harsh inner critic, an internal voice that tells them they are not good enough, that they are unworthy of love, that they are destined to be alone. This voice is not their own. It is the echo of the neglect they experienced. Learning to replace that voice with kindness and self-acceptance is a process, but it is one of the most transformative steps toward healing. Psychologist Kristin Neff, one of the leading researchers on self-compassion, has shown that practicing self-kindness rather than self-judgment can reduce anxiety, increase resilience, and help individuals build a healthier sense of self-worth. But healing cannot happen in isolation. One of the most damaging effects of childhood neglect is the belief that one must handle everything alone. Many survivors find it difficult to trust others, to ask for help, or to rely on anyone emotionally. But research has shown that connection is a fundamental part of healing. Safe, supportive relationships, whether through friendships, therapy, or community, can provide the emotional validation that was missing in childhood. For some, therapy is an essential step in this process. Working with a therapist who specializes in childhood trauma can help individuals understand their patterns, process their past, and develop healthier ways of relating to themselves and others. Therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, EMDR, and somatic experiencing have all been found to be effective in healing from childhood neglect and trauma. But healing is not only about the mind, it is also about the body. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Trauma, including emotional neglect, is stored in the nervous system. This is why some survivors experience physical symptoms such as chronic fatigue, digestive issues, muscle tension, or even autoimmune conditions. Engaging in activities that help release stored trauma from the body, such as yoga, dance, or breathwork, can be incredibly beneficial. Still, the most profound aspect of healing is perhaps the hardest to accept. Survivors of childhood neglect must learn to reparent themselves. They must become the source of love, validation, and care that they did not receive as children. This means creating a safe internal environment, one where they no longer criticize themselves for feeling hurt, where they allow themselves to set boundaries, where they learn that their needs are valid. But what if I told you that there is something even more powerful, that the most transformative realization of all is still ahead? What if the very thing that once caused pain could become the key to a new kind of strength? One that has the potential to reshape not just one life, but generations to come. In the final part of this video, we will uncover the ultimate truth about healing from childhood neglect, a truth that has the power to change everything. Stay with me, because what comes next might be the most important revelation of all. The most powerful truth about healing from childhood neglect is this: the pain you endured does not have to define you. The wounds of your past may have shaped you, but they do not have to control your future. In fact, the very struggles that once held you back can become the foundation of your greatest strength. Many survivors of neglect carry a deep sense of shame, believing that their suffering is a sign of weakness. But what if the opposite were true? What if surviving neglect is not a mark of deficiency, but proof of resilience? The fact that you are here, seeking to understand, to heal, to grow, that is evidence of something extraordinary. It means that despite everything, a part of you never gave up. A part of you still believes in the possibility of something better. And that part of you is powerful beyond measure. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. You may not be able to change the past, but you have the power to change the way it shapes your future." Healing does not mean erasing what happened. It means transforming it. It means taking the pain that was once a source of suffering and turning it into a source of wisdom, compassion, and strength. One of the most profound ways to do this is through purpose. Studies in psychology have shown that individuals who find meaning in their suffering are more likely to experience post-traumatic growth, a phenomenon where adversity leads to profound personal transformation. This does not mean that suffering is necessary for growth, but it does mean that growth is possible even in the aftermath of suffering. Many people who experience childhood neglect go on to become healers, teachers, mentors, and advocates. They take the love they never received and use it to uplift others. They become the person they once needed. But here is where the real transformation happens. When you heal, you do not just heal for yourself. You break a cycle that may have existed for generations. You become the person who provides warmth, understanding, and validation to others, whether to your own children, to friends, or even to strangers who need kindness. The power of your healing extends far beyond you. Think about that for a moment. Every act of self-compassion, every boundary you set, every time you choose to acknowledge your emotions instead of suppressing them, you are rewriting the script of your life. You are proving that neglect does not have the final say. And if you are still wondering whether healing is possible for you, let me remind you of this. The fact that you are here, listening, absorbing, and reflecting is already proof that the journey has begun. Healing is not about reaching a perfect state where you never struggle again. It is about choosing day after day to treat yourself with the kindness and care you deserved all along. So the final and most powerful truth is this: you are not broken, you are becoming, and your story is far from over. If this video resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And remember, you are worthy of love, healing, and a future filled with hope. Thanks for looking.